Good morning, everyone. We'll just give folks a few more minutes to trickle in. We're about half of our registrations have signed on, so we'll give a little bit more time for the other half to finish up their previous meetings. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll just start in about one more minute, almost at our registration list here. Okay, I think we should probably get started. Zoe, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Zoe Elizabeth. I'm the Manager of Energy Services at Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Thank you all so much for being here. We're excited. This is our official 2022 Reach Codes kickoff for local government staff. So this initiative really builds off of work that we did in the last code cycle to help support member jurisdictions in each of the respective CCAs. EVCE is new to this formal collaboration this year, which is really exciting, expanding the network. So many of you here were part of that process, and I just have to say really congratulations and thank you for your participation, for those of you who passed a REACH code and those of you who just were engaged in the conversation. What we heard directly from state agency staff is that it was the work and leadership of local governments that's really demonstrated to the state to go further in electrification in this code cycle than they otherwise would have. So that's a long way of saying that your efforts have really mattered to the constituents within your communities, but also more broadly as well. So thank you so much. And going forward towards 2022, we're here to kind of talk through what's going to happen, the resources that are available, and also just to remind everyone that we at each CCA, we're your point of contact. We're here to help and support you with technical resources to connect you with the TRC team as needed, to hear your feedback and input. You all are the experts here. So we look forward to providing information, but also to a really engaged and informative conversation, us hearing from you all. So thank you for your participation. And if you're one of the 13 member agencies from SVCE, I look forward to working close with you over the next year and the rest of you getting to know you as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it to my colleague, Aaron Kim from EVCE.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Kim, Energy Fellow with the East Bay Community Energy. We cover 14 cities in our service area, include in the East Bay, mainly in the County of Alameda, and along with the City of Tracy. And next up is Blake.
Hi all, I'm Blake Hershaft. Thanks for everyone who worked with me when I was on the consultant side for this project starting in 2019. I considered this Reach Codes process the most important project of my career. Lucky enough to be working with Peninsula Clean Energy now. I'm the Building Electrifications Program Manager, so thanks everyone for joining. As you can see, a list here of team members, the consultants who were so successful last time, our collaborators at San Mateo and Santa Clara County, and everyone else on the team. I'm gonna jump right into the timeline that we're gonna look through for the next year. So working backward, the goal is to provide REACH codes that can be adopted in line with the 2022 building code adoption cycle. So that means that we have to pass things in fall this year. Today we're at the kickoff meeting. In February, there will be ongoing outreach meetings and 3 workshops, including another city-specific workshop. Then cost effectiveness studies will be performed. Draft REACH codes will come in the summer, well ahead of the local adoption cycle that's typically used. And now I'm going to pass it off to Farhad at TRC.
Thank you, Blake. Yeah, we are definitely glad that Blake was able to transition from the consulting team to still being on the team for the REACH code. So he was tremendously helpful for our success last code cycle that we're going to try to build on this year as well. I'll be kind of your shepherd for the rest of the meeting. The topics we'll cover are building electrification, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, new construction and alteration scenarios. Our agenda today will be to reflect on the 2019 REACH Code initiative, and we have a special guest in Mr. Bob Lennon from the city of Campbell, who will share his personal reflections as part of that. We'll provide a brief overview of the 2022 California Building Code, and so that we establish the foundation upon which our REACH Code will be exceeding. We'll go over the 2022 REACH Code initiative in detail. That'll be our 20-minute bulk of the meeting. And then we want to reserve a lot of time at the end for your feedback on whether our direction is the right one. We welcome clarifying and technical questions throughout the presentation. Please raise your hand or type them into the chat or in the QA function. Any and all is great. My colleague Myra Vega, also at TRC, will be helping us monitor any questions that come through.
And Farhad, would this be a good time to unmute participants and let them know that if they want to speak, they can unmute themselves?
Yes, I have unmuted everybody, and you should be able to unmute yourselves at any time now. So yeah, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, type into the chat or Q&A. If it's a clarifying technical question, we'll do that in the middle of the presentation. Okay. So electrification, I think that many folks on the phone today are familiar with electrification, but to level set, we want to compare the benefits of electrification to fossil fuels. So electrification of our building stock and our vehicles allows us to leverage carbon-free electricity. We have an executive order at the state level that requires carbon neutrality across entire. I'm getting some echo now.
If you are attending and you haven't muted yourself, please do so. If you aren't speaking, that might be where the feedback's coming from.
Okay. All right. Should be okay now. We do have an executive order to be carbon neutral across our whole economy in California by 2045. Major component of that is our electricity supply. PCE, SVCE, and EVC all have currently carbon-free electricity. They buy enough carbon-free electricity to offset our Bay Area usage as of now. And the next big step is to make sure that that electricity is carbon-free for every hour of the day. And that is technically feasible. And one of the CCAs at Peninsula Clean Energy, they have started considering what that mix might look like. You can see that it includes base loads of geothermal, small hydro, some wind power, solar power, energy storage, and load shaping. electrification is a carbon-free source of energy. It is also the lowest cost, lowest risk way to achieve a carbon-free source of energy. There's a couple of different studies that have shown this, that vehicle and building electrification compared to biofuels, hydrogen, captured methane, all those pieces, it is the lowest cost, lowest risk pathway to achieve our carbon-free buildings and vehicles in the future. There's substantial cost savings to avoid gas infrastructure and maintain the gas grid. And at a macroeconomic scale, we have that justification. This is our fastest way to achieve our 2045 goals. Combusting fossil fuels in our homes leads to poorer air quality than using electric appliances, which has been linked to increases in child asthma rates. A couple of meta-studies listed here. There are tremendous health benefits from going to electrification and moving away from fossil fuels. There's also job creation that is that has been demonstrated to be gained from going to electrification. There's a couple of studies out of UCLA and University of Massachusetts that show the job losses that would happen as a result of moving to electrification are far outweighed by the jobs to be gained. Furthermore, if folks were tracking California's proposed budget by Governor Newsom a couple of weeks ago, that included a $65 million proposal for displaced oil and gas workers. That includes well capping training as well as early retirement. So this is something that is, in consideration and that we're planning for right now. So electrification is our #1 goal and objective for the 2022 initiative because of all the benefits that I described previously. Some other goals and objectives include continuity. We want to readopt by January 1st, 2023, so that there are no enforcement gaps between previously adopted REACH codes and the next code cycle. We want to simplify the code language, reduce any complexities around exceptions, and reduce permitting barriers. We want to expand, finally, to capture new cities to participate. I hope there's many of you on the line today. And we also want to start touching existing buildings, develop the policy and programs necessary so that we can electrify our buildings and our vehicle infrastructure in existing building stock. All right, with that, we'd like to pass it over to Mr. Bob Lennon to share your reflections over the last couple of years that you've been implementing your all-electric required ordinance. I believe, Bob, if you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have a space heating required and water heating required ordinance for your residential buildings.
That is correct. Welcome, everybody. I am Bob Lennon with the City of Campbell. 2 years ago, our City Council approved a REACH code. It disallowed the gas for warm air heating and water heating. Well, something else happened 2 years ago, and that was COVID-19. My building official decided to retire, and I became the acting building official. So I'm trying to figure out COVID and my new job and all. And I'm discussing what's going on with Susan O'Brien, who's one of my code consultants. She says, Bob, you can't administer this REACH code until you actually get officially adopted. And I swear to God, panic just set in. I don't know what to do with it. So I reached out to Brianne Boyle with the county, kind of sent her a 911 help me out kind of email. And she was great. She was really great. She sent me a template where I could kind of insert jurisdiction name here, write a letter and do some things. And I followed her guidelines in the template. And I sent it back to Brianne, and she did all the proofreading. When we thought we were all ready to go, we sent this to Farhad, and he did the final adjustments, had me add something, take something out. And we were entered onto the agenda of the CEC. Fantastic. So that whole process was taken about 4 months. And during that 4 months, other things happened. We had a new code cycle, 2019, which would require solar panels on new homes and ADUs. I reduced the permit process that we had in-house, which would streamline the process for EV charging, solar, and reduce the fees as well. We started seeing a doubling in our permit applications for anything electrification. And what it is, it created kind of like this perfect storm. We had 4 elements that were coming into us, and we now had to administer it. So the challenges that we received, certainly there were some complaints with kind of a general resistance to anything that changes. And that has seemed to kind of settle down. We do see a strain on the infrastructure. So if you're going to be fully electric, say your house now goes from 125 amp panel to maybe a 400 amp panel, there's increased upsizing of the wires, of the transformers on the poles, and that's kind of a PG&E deal, but there's sometimes that we're waiting for PG&E to catch up. Either way, it was a good process for us. I certainly learned a whole lot jumping into this, and what was really scary for me really turned out to not be so scary, and is just fantastic. So a few years ago, you know, California made a goal to reduce our reliance on carbon fuel emissions, and to kind of embrace clean energy. And I want to say that Campbell is very much a part of that goal. And to get there has been a really easy process. All of the people involved helped us along the way. And I really believe that together we're going to meet this goal. And it feels good to be part of a team and a movement that is really going to make a difference. So for that, Campbell is doing a good job, and we're seeing a double in the permit applications, and we're moving, we're getting there. It's nice to be part of that. That's all I got.
Thanks, Bob. Farhad, before you continue, we do have a hand raised from Esmeralda Cortez. So you should be unmuted, but and let me go back to where you are on the attendee list. I'm going to unmute you, but you will also have to unmute yourself. All right, Esmeralda, are you there?
Yes, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
No problem. We're watching those raised hands. You can go for it anytime you want.
Letting you know we are monitoring. We want your feedback, so we want this to be interactive. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand, use the chat box, and unmute yourself and ask any questions you have. Back to you, Farhad.
Thank you, Bob, so much for that recap. And I think you hit a pretty important point, which is we're here to support you and your colleagues, because there are a large number of building applications coming through. There's a lot of development that's happening, and we want to provide the tools, resources, the capacity to pass these policies without significant burden on city staff or city council members. So if we go, continue reflecting on 2019, what we saw was that 30 of the 49 member agencies across the 3 CCAs adopted some form of REACH code, so about 2/3, which is amazing. And that also represented 57% of the electrification REACH code statewide, which is amazing and speaks to the benefits that Zoe mentioned at the beginning, that the tools, the resources, the team that we are building here has ramifications statewide, and we anticipate both of these numbers to increase this code cycle. We also saw that there were 20 EV infrastructure codes as part of those 30 that were building electrification codes that were adopted. We would also love to see that number of EV infrastructure codes increased to match that building electrification adoption. So please consider that as you're going forward. Also reflecting on 2019, how did we support with implementation? In addition to what Bob mentioned in terms of application support for the California Energy Commission, We provided 2-hour trainings led by Bayren to over 11 agencies. We'd love to deliver more of these next code cycle because they were very favorably reviewed via the post training surveys that we sent out. We developed counter checklists that were customizable for each city based on the specifics of the code that were adopted within that city. And we also provided code interpretation support. You know, if there was nuance around exception criteria or unclear language based on the specified scope of the building by the applicant, then we provided some support there as well. We also provided building industry support. We supported 50+ inquiries from a variety of stakeholders, hosted developer and contractor training events, and we had a website here at allelectricdesign.org that houses a variety of tools, including this pretty snazzy pool heat pump design guide that demonstrates the feasibility of having a all-electric pool heating system. It goes over warranties, relevant manufacturers, relevant contractors. There's a lot of detail there. Okay, so we talked about adoption, we talked about implementation. Now let's talk about litigation. This always comes up. There were 3 litigations that happened last code cycle. The first was at Berkeley. They adopted a municipal all-electric ordinance, and this was ultimately rejected by a federal court because of the way the plaintiff prepared their legal challenge. The federal court said we would reject that legal challenge because the ordinance does not directly regulate energy use or energy efficiency of covered appliances. It regulated the gas infrastructure, and it was within the health and safety code at the city of Berkeley. So that one was rejected. At Windsor, they had a slightly different approach. They amended their building code, specifically the Energy Code Part 6, and Windsor chose to repeal their REACH code because the town could not sufficiently fund the legal defense. So they didn't even try, unfortunately, to defend the all-electric REACH code. So that was a repeal. However, a very similar amendment in the city of Santa Rosa, also an Energy Code Part 6 amendment, was rejected by a California court on the grounds that a CEQA analysis was not necessary for this particular amendment, or the CEQA analysis was satisfactory, I should say. The litigant has appealed this. It's a major builder that operates in Sonoma County. So we'll see how that goes and we'll track that. But the key takeaway is that both a municipal code amendment or a building code amendment are legally defensible if funded. Okay, I think, Myra, at this point, we're going to go to an audience poll. So folks who are in attendance, we want to hear from you. Myra, would you please lead us through this?
Yeah. Before I launch the poll, we do have a question from Sarah Moore.
Great.
I'm going to unmute you, and Sarah, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm from City of Berkeley, and did just want to add that our decision has also been appealed. City of Berkeley remains quite confident that we will again be victorious, but just to give full transparency there.
Thank you so much. That wasn't available in my citation there, so good to know that it's appealed.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That's really exciting news. And what I'll do now is start the poll. There will be a series of 3 questions. So I will launch the first one. And I will give folks a couple minutes to respond before I close the poll.
I think probably just 30 seconds is good, Myra.
Thanks. Just trying to figure out what the appropriate time is here. And actually, I could see it in progress. So looks like folks are still responding. I hope I'm pronouncing this name correctly. Napor, you have your hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. You did pronounce that correctly. I
Okay.
just wanted to, I had a question on the slide just before this poll. And so at the bottom of the slide, we said they're legally defensible if funded. I was wondering if the speaker could clarify what the if funded part meant.
Yeah, the city of Windsor did not fund their legal defense, so they repealed their reach code. However, a very similar ordinance at Santa Rosa was funded, and they were successful in the California court pending appeal. So from what we've seen, if a city chooses to fund a legal defense, they have so far been successful. Does that make sense?
Yes, I wasn't sure if it meant the reach code was funded in some way. So thank you for that clarification.
Sure. I think, Myra, we should present the poll results.
Yep. So here are the results. So it looks like most of the challenges came from a kind of even spread between competing city priorities, displacing reach codes, and inadequate staff training buy-in to support adoption. So
Very interesting.
it's the two biggest barriers. So we appreciate your feedback. This is, the point of this webinar and our February workshops as well. We want to make sure that we help you address these challenges and provide the resources necessary to help you adopt your reach codes.
I'll just note really quick before we move on to the next question. We do have a feedback form on bayareareachcodes.org. I'll post the link, or we can put that in the chat actually. If there's specific feedback that you'd like to provide, please use that form or email us. That's also very welcome. I'm kind of glad to see that inadequate technical assistance was illustrated here, but I'd love to see that at 0% as well. So yeah, we'll work on that.
Great, thanks, Farhad. And now I'm going to launch the second question. So this one is asking, if you adopted a reach code, what implementation challenges did you encounter? So yeah, it looks like folks are still responding. Okay, looks like everyone's done. I'll give everyone about 10 more seconds. Okay, all right, and here are the results. So for the top two, it's interesting. There's a split between, and the first one I'm not terribly surprised by. It's applicants being unfamiliar with the reach codes, and that's tied with nothing. The reach code implementation went smoothly.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Third place is the other. Again, would be really interested to see how our service offerings, this code cycle, this initiative term could improve to address any other issues that we were not previously, addressing. Thanks for that feedback.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone that answered other to please use the feedback tracker to expand on what other implementation challenges you've encountered.
Or write your thoughts down and we'll discuss them. We can ping pong them around at the end of the technical presentation here. We have about 30 minutes for open discussion, so that'll be a great place to share what went right and what went wrong.
Real quick, this is Hipólito with the city of Gilroy. I just want to say the reason I chose the other is the question is if you adopted. So for the agencies that have not adopted, there is no other choice but other. And that's why I selected other.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks, Hipolito. No need to respond, but we do have a question for those if you did not adopt. So on our third question here. So Myra, if you launch that one, please. If you are from representing a city that did adopt a reach code, please don't address this one. Don't answer this question here.
Okay, I'll give folks about 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna close the poll, share the results here, and about 20% of our attendees responded to this one. And I'll be honest, I didn't check the response rate for the last one, but we could pull those results if you want to share them.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, this is encouraging.
I'm pumping my fist in here.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's also great to see that we have a 20% of our audience that hasn't previously participated in the Reach Code, and that there's strong council support for Reach Code this code cycle.
Yep.
That's fantastic news.
Yeah, and for the 23 and 8%, the 31% that responded, with 2 and 3, it'd be great if we could have a discussion at the end of the presentation today. If you could share some, what are the council concerns that you're coming across that are preventing you from adopting a Reach Code, and hopefully we could help you find some solutions and some support.
And one thing I'll discuss during this presentation is we don't necessarily have all of the answers. A lot of the information is going to be circulated from city to city. So the time at the end today may be a great place to exchange tips for successful passage and implementation. Okay, thank you everybody for that participation. I'm going to provide a quick, brief overview of the California Code so that we are on the same page about where our Reach Code will be building on to that. So first starting with the Energy Code, the Energy Efficiency Standards, Title 24, Part 6. On the new construction side, the big change here is that heat pumps are the prescriptive baseline. California is the first state in the country to require such a baseline. In residential buildings, this means that a heat pump is setting your prescriptive energy budget. For space heating in climate zones 3 and 4, that's San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and the west side of Alameda County.
Farhad, what should we be seeing on your slide?
Just the new construction side right now. It's a few paragraphs.
Okay.
It'll keep populating over time.
All right. Does everyone else see the poll questions still?
Correct.
We see the poll.
Oh.
Okay.
Hmm.
You might have to end it, Myra. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I stopped the polls. Farhad, are you sharing your screen? Can you double check you're sharing your screen?
Yes. So I'll stop showing my screen and I will share it again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Whew. Okay, that was a close one. Okay. So residential space heating heat pumps are the prescriptive baseline. Climate zones 3 and 4, that's San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and the west side of Alameda County. What this means is that the heat pump is setting your energy budget for space heating. In climate zone 12, which is the east side of Alameda County, water heating is the prescriptive heat pump baseline in residential buildings. In non-residential, most of the building types already have many of the end uses as space heating, or most of the building types have water heating or space heating as already an electric system setting the prescriptive budget. Larger buildings with central space heating are kind of the biggest one, where it's still not a prescriptive heat pump there, and there are some technical challenges. Nonetheless, if you do design an all-electric building within the confines of the energy software, you do get a performance credit. This is most noticeable in residential building stock, meaning you get a 3%, 5% bump if you electrify both your space heating and your water heating. So that's a good thing. And it's in many ways, the state's energy code is electric preferred because of this performance credit. Couple of other important things to know. On the residential side, pre-wiring is required for gas appliances. Any gas appliances that are used, you have to have electrical wiring there to facilitate future electric appliances. Sorry about the downtown Oakland background noise. Hopefully everybody's safe out there. Higher ventilation rate if you're installing a gas stove is required. So this is to reflect the indoor air quality benefits or impacts of fossil fuel usage. And residential buildings will also have energy storage readiness requirements. This includes panel capacity and physical space shown on the plans.
Hey, Farhad.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat box. Can you explain the difference in baselines between the climate zones?
The baselines are different in different climate zones based on analysis done at the California Energy Commission. So depending on the energy impacts and the cost impacts that are climate dependent, the Energy Commission determined different appliances would serve as the baseline. So a building in climate zone 3, if you install a fossil gas a space heater, you get an energy penalty on your compliance form. It's harder to comply with the energy code if you have a space heater that's using fossil gas. The same will be true for a fossil gas water heater in climate zone 12. You'll get an energy penalty. You won't get that penalty if the opposite is, if you specify the opposite. Hope that answers the question. It is a technical nuance. On the non-residential building side, this is a pretty big impact. There's solar PV required now, prescriptively, but it's essentially mandatory because it's really hard to trade off that energy impact. So there's solar PV required and battery storage required. So we have on-site generation and resiliency measures prescriptively required for our non-residential building stock. This is a pretty important step to hardening our grid overall. Okay, on the existing building side, there was pretty limited, constrained updates, nothing big. There's some restrictions on newly installed electric resistance space heating, and it's simplified some language to allow heat pump retrofits, but nothing major that changed on existing buildings this code cycle. A lot of the cleanup was already done in 2019 to enable heat pumps to comply.
Farhad, we have another question in the chat box. Can you just repeat that first bullet about heat pumps being the prescriptive baseline? I think you offered an example or two.
Yeah. So if you're designing a single family building from a builder's perspective, you meet the energy budget if you are installing a heat pump for your space heater. You're complying. If you install a gas system, you get a penalty. That's true in climate zones 3 and 4. Again, from the builder's perspective, if you install a gas water heater in climate zone 12, you get a penalty. But if you install a heat pump water heater, you're meeting the energy budget. If you do both of those things, you actually get a performance credit in those climate zones. And I'll get a little bit into that on the next slide. So in 2022 Cal Green, there's a voluntary tier for energy efficiency. It goes above the Part 6 standards. If you electrify both your heat pump and space heating and water heating, you get a performance credit. In Calgary, it says we're going to require that you electrify both your space and water heating, which is good. It's electric preferred. However, it still allows a mixed fuel compliance pathway. If you have all gas appliances, you can still comply with the energy code. If you have battery storage, for example. It also doesn't talk at all about electric cooking or electric laundry. There's nothing that encourages those. So from this initiative's perspective, it's an incomplete solution for our decarbonization goals. And I'll get into what we think is a complete solution in a couple different slides. Briefly on the EV infrastructure, and I'll reshare this information with context in our model codes, but the EV infrastructure code at the state level mandates 40% of EV parking spaces in multifamily buildings have some level of EV infrastructure, and they have these 3 tiers of requirements. So that's good. Before it was 10% EV capable, now we're 40%, and there's a significant amount of EV ready or EV charger stations. It still falls short of 100%, which is the equitable solution. On the non-residential side, the mandatory requirement has 20% EV infrastructure, better than 6% EV capable in previous years. And we feel this is actually a pretty good spot, except there's not high enough penetration for office buildings where we have longer dwelling parking. I'll share this information again within the context of our model codes in a few slides. I think an important note here is that there's also make-ready requirements, EV-ready requirements for medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles in grocery, warehouse, and retail buildings for the loading docks, which I think is a pretty cool addition. Okay, any other clarifying questions on the state's energy code before I go into the reach code offerings for our 2022 initiative? That's okay.
So Bill Tott has his hand up. Bill, do you want to ask your question or give your comment?
Yes, hi. Hey, Farhad. I just want to say hello personally. I haven't seen you for a while, and I really appreciate it. I want to just give a shout out to you for all the help when Milpitas launched our reach codes very successfully the last code cycle, and very beneficial the information and support given by you and your associates, especially getting up in front of council to, put us over the finish line. I had just one small question on the higher ventilation rate for gas stoves. Is that relative to ASHRAE 62 or, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I believe it is relative to ASHRAE 62.2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay. So those would be higher then, okay. Yes, ventilation rate, yeah, for new. Okay, thanks.
Yes, if I know about that at a high level. If there's more technical depth that you want to provide, we have plenty of resources that we can dive into and identify exactly what those ventilation rates are and what the baseline is to jump up to. Okay, I want to keep us on track and make sure we have about 30 minutes left at the end. So our 2022 Reach Code Initiative offerings. There is a change that we're recommending from our previous code offerings, and we're recommending an all-electric municipal ordinance. This is posted already on bayareareachcodes.org for your review. We feel that this is the most effective, flexible approach. It avoids the triennial building code cycle altogether because we're not exactly sure where the 2025 energy code will land, and we want to make sure that we do not have gas in new construction buildings. So we feel that this is the appropriate approach. The cons are there's limited efficiency options. If a particular jurisdiction wants to include efficiency measures, additional solar PV than what is already required, additional battery, the municipal ordinance is probably not the best place to do that. A second option is a CalGreen amendment. This is essentially the all-electric code that we promoted under the 2019 initiative, but instead of being an energy code amendment, it would actually be a CalGreen amendment. Based on discussions with California Energy Commission and specific feedback they provided to South San Francisco, if we're not touching energy conservation or energy efficiency requirements at all, if it's only dictating electrification, it does not need to get Energy Commission approval. It does not need to be an energy code amendment, and CalGreen is totally fine for that. So it's effective, does not require CEC approval. It does require, as a con, triennial code updates and possibly more if there are intervening cycles that for CalGreen that we need to also build on. Again, limited efficiency options if we're going to add those things, not the best place to do it in CalGreen. Energy code would be a kind of option of last resort. It would allow us to include efficiency and load management measures above that required by the state's energy code, but then we do trigger California Energy Commission approval. One approach that we promoted, it was actually our starting point for the 2019 code cycle, was the electric preferred approach. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, the state's energy code is already electric preferred at this point. So we actually are not recommending this anymore. We really want to get gas out of our new construction buildings and ensure that's happening. So this would be a little duplicative with where the state code is already going to be at 2023. Okay, so this is where the code could live, and definitely want your feedback on how this lands. I want to also talk about the code concepts, what actually is contained in the code that's posted right now on Bay Area reachcodes.org. It requires all electric construction. It includes a new construction definition, and there are some optional exceptions. That's a separate document. The all electric construction requirement also restricts the extension of any existing gas infrastructure to new parts of the building. That's something that many of the jurisdictions that adopted this type of municipal ordinance had language on before. The new construction definition dictates that if either 50% of above sill framing or 50% of the foundation or more is replaced for purposes other than repair or reinforcement over 3 years, you are triggering the new construction definition. This was adopted by several cities under the 2019 code. This is a suggestion if your city doesn't already have its own new construction definition that it could apply. We're basically trying to avoid a scenario where a building is leaving one wall up and trying to fall under alteration requirements.
Hey, Farhad. Can you speak a little bit on exceptions for restaurants or other types of industries? There we go.
Yeah, perfect. The last piece here is optional exceptions. These do draw from the variety that we saw in 2019, but they really hone in on the general terms that were included in the municipal code amendments. That's accounting for infeasibility, public interest, and then technology-specific exemptions, so commercial kitchens, commercial laundry, industrial processes. These are set to expire in 2025 because they do have technical solutions already. They are feasible. It's just that the cost effectiveness criteria is a little gray area right now. So that's, we're not promoting the broad use of any of these exceptions. These should be considered on a case-by-case basis because technologically speaking, we can and should build all electric. It's just depending on your specific stakeholder feedback, the council concerns and how important those are. We provide some options based on what we saw in 2019. Regardless of the exception criteria, anything that is exempted should have an electric readiness component to it that includes pre-wiring and physical space. We know that there are challenges if we try to do pre-wiring or physical modification to a space after a gas in a retrofit scenario. It adds a lot more cost. So we want all gas situations to have electric readiness components. Okay, so that's it on new construction. And we have, this is a kickoff meeting. This is a high-level overview. Our February meeting will be a deep dive into the code language. This is more so for high-level information and providing feedback at the last 30 minutes from you all. On the existing building side, there are a lot of issues related to existing buildings that are not present in new construction. We're still learning a lot, and we need to balance doing it with a sense of urgency as well as equitably. Both of these are important. We need to be both equitable and do it as fast as possible. Code language, which is our wheelhouse, and technical support, which is our wheelhouse, is one of the considerations. Other considerations are outreach and education strategy, financing and incentive programs at the city level, at the regional level, state and federal levels. And this is something that that we're monitoring. We encourage ongoing collaboration between some of the leading agencies who are starting to think about this, the lessons learned and the strategy. But what we're seeing is that based on the specific, there needs to be a level of specificity around the local community organizations and local community issues that are going to have to be faced when we're considering such a big change to our existing building stock.
Hi, Farhad. We have Anthony, I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right, Ulo, has had his hand up. Anthony, go ahead and mute yourself, and what's your question?
Hey, Tony. Tony, you're still muted. I don't know if we can.
He's unmuted, but we can't hear him.
Maybe type it into the chat.
Yeah.
And we'll get there.
And there was another question in the chat about incorporating all electric technologies, about outdoor barbecues, kitchen fire pits, swimming pools. Maybe we leave that as a discussion for the end. What do you think, Farhad, or is that a quick response?
My initial response is that if we allow the gas grid to be connected for any of those end uses that frankly already have electric solutions, we don't leverage the tremendous benefits of cost savings to be gained from disconnecting entirely from the gas grid. We also, if you think about it, the last building that still is using gas, even if it's for an outdoor barbecue, needs to keep a pressurized grid all the way to the wellhead. And the same methane leakage will exist throughout that whole gas grid for that one barbecue. So we really need to be careful about the places that we allow for non-electric solutions or natural gas solutions to be installed.
And for swimming pools specifically, we did put together a cost effectiveness report showing that yes, you can heat up pools with heat pumps. It's a matter of finding the appropriate contractor who's familiar with the technology. But that is on our website, bayareareachcodes.org. And before you move on, we have one more question. Let me know if this is one you can tackle now or towards the end. But could you speak to the issue of coordinating with regional agencies? I think this is on that next slide that you were just on.
Yes. Yeah. So
such as BACMed, I think you have that on there.
For sure. Yeah. So this is so our approach to existing buildings. How are we going to do this? I think specifically with how we're going to coordinate with regional agencies, that's going to be a referential type of thing. We need to be in the loop on their rulemaking processes, their timelines, their considerations. They're just BACMed and CARB are just in the beginning phases, and they have different timelines surrounding their potential emissions regulations around space heating and water heating appliances. They will certainly impact how buildings get constructed, and we will coordinate with them on behalf of this initiative and share any findings that we have. Some other elements of our approach would be to summarize codes and development processes. There are some cities that have already adopted existing building electrification codes. Denver, City of Denver, Colorado, most notable, most recent in my mind. They have a point of permit as well as a building performance standard requirement. We want to look at those and digest that information and share that with this group to understand the level of appropriateness for our agencies. There's a lot to do here, so that's one element. The other element is to prioritize. Prioritize what strategy is appropriate when. Policy considerations is one of those, but stakeholder engagement is a very important one. Assessing your building stock and the opportunities and challenges with electrification for your particular building stock. Financing strategies. We need to uncover the lessons learned from the agencies that have already adopted these types of policies or have been thinking through them a lot. This is going to be a long-term process. We're going to start this in the next couple of weeks, and we expect to start rolling out the summaries and the tools and so on over the next several months.
I just want to do a time check. So for the sake of getting you through the end of your presentation, I'm going to ask that we hold questions. You can ask your questions in the chat, and we'll answer those in the last 30 minutes of the presentation.
Yeah, I'll try to go through this relatively briefly, and we'll share the slides towards the end. We also, on the bottom left here, I just want to touch on, we'll develop code for low-hanging fruit. If you're installing an air conditioner or installing a new pool, those are definitely existing building scenarios that we want to be captured. Don't want to miss those opportunities for those to be electric. We can come up with also code language that dictates an end of flow date and provides a sense of certainty to the building community or the existing building residents or owners about when they're expecting to remove fossil gas equipment out of their buildings. These are typically longer term goals, but when a retrofit's happening, it's important to have those in place so there is certainty from the developer or the applicant. Okay, EV infrastructure. We are also, so moving on, EV infrastructure, new construction, we're recommending a zoning code amendment. It has a lot of the same benefits as the municipal code amendment for building electrification. It can be flexible. It makes the developer aware at the time of the land use permit, the the EV infrastructure requirements. You can align it with other land use regulations such as transit-oriented development, other transit requirements, on-street parking, and so on. Now, the complexity here is we need to comprehensively replicate that all of the Cal Green mandatory requirements, or show that we are exceeding those Cal Green mandatory requirements in that zoning code. This is still, could be preferable to amending the Cal Green code. We are still likely going to develop a Cal Green strike through and underline version for cities that want to adopt a Part 11 Cal Green EV infrastructure amendment. Another benefit of having that EV infrastructure amendment is that you can adopt just a Part 11 code amendment alongside your all-electric building code requirements. So that's another consideration. Now, drawback is that every triennial cycle, you'll have to redo all of your underlines and strike throughs. With your zoning code, it's probably going to be much more minor changes in order to ensure you're exceeding Cal Green. I spoke with a couple cities that have zoning code amendments for their EV infrastructure requirements, City of Alameda and City of San Luis Obispo. There's not any major flags that they considered for having a zoning code EV infrastructure requirement. I think it comes down, and what they mentioned is it comes down to the city's particular culture and the particular processes. So something I'd be interested in hearing from you all is who commonly performs on-site EV infrastructure inspections. And from what you know about your planning department versus your building department, who's going to be best to review and require these EV infrastructure pieces. Okay, want to level set for EV code terminology. Level 1 is 3 to 4 miles per hour. If you assume that you're parked overnight, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., you get almost 50 miles of charging overnight. That's a level 1. That's more than adequate for most daily commutes. Level 2 is 10 to 20 miles per charging hour, and then level 3 is anything above a level 2. We have EV capable, which is a panel capacity plus conduit requirement. That's one type of requirement. EV ready installs the wire and has a receptacle. The vehicle owner needs to bring their own charging cable. EV charging station is EV ready plus the EV charging station is provided on site. And we'll be presenting the percent of parking spaces that fall under each of these requirements on the next slides. Our model code has a single family requirement that exceeds CalGreen's by requiring 2 EV ready spaces, one of which are level 2, the other one is level 1. This allows simultaneous charging of 2 vehicles and allows the owner, the homeowner or the occupant, to prioritize which vehicle gets the faster charging. If there's one vehicle that is totally empty and needs to have a full charge by the next morning, that would get the level 2. It's accounting for the fact that it's going to be very rare that both vehicles are completely empty and need a full charge by the next morning, the next day. On the multifamily side, this gets a little complex. I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time going through the details on this because I want to, and maybe we can talk about it more if that's a priority of the discussion period. The main improvement that we see above CalGreen is 100% access at multifamily dwellings for EV charging. We believe it's highly inequitable for a resident of a single family building or a townhome to be able to have access to EV charging, but multifamily dwelling residents do not, considering the tremendous economic benefits that EV ownership has. So home charging is a significant benefit here. So we build on the CalGreen requirements in a way that we feel exceeds the intent of the code in terms of power connected without adding too much cost. We do have an affordable housing carve out that allows for low power L2 EV ready, considering the more complex financing streams that affordable housing developers need to navigate. It's an option for affordable housing developers if they would like. On the non-residential side, we do have a distinct requirement for office buildings because these types of buildings have longer dwell times for parking. So more EV charging at offices in particular. All other non-residential occupancies would have lower capacity charging requirements, still exceeding those of the 2022 CalGreen marginally here. We can come back to this, but forgive me, I'll want to kind of breeze through these for now. On the EV infrastructure for existing buildings, there are triggers that we're recommending as well. If you're adding parking or upgrading your electrical panel, you have to meet the new construction requirements for any additional parking. For multifamily non-residential buildings, we're actually leveraging a new CalGreen requirement. So this is pointing to just the state code. This is not a reach measure, except for the non-residential piece. Basically, it says when new parking facilities are added and you have electrical systems or lighting being upgraded or in any kind of way, and the work requires a permit, 10% of those total number of parking spaces affected will be EVCS. This is the verbatim CalGreen requirement for multifamily buildings. We're applying the same thing for non-residential buildings as our reach measure. We also are adding a time certain policy so that any multifamily or non-residential property that has EV capable spaces because of previous Calgary requirements, that they upgrade those EV capable spaces to a minimum of L1 EV ready. So at some point, those EV capable spaces we're hoping get used, and this is a time certain policy that says, yes, those will be used by January 1st, 2025. Really interested to hear feedback on this proposal. Whew, okay, so that's all the code proposals. Again, you'll find all of that in detail on bayareareachcodes.org. I want to kind of provide a high-level overview of all of the services that we're providing. So number one is the model codes. Number two is stakeholder meetings. Please reach out when you would like support. We may hold additional regional public meetings. Highly recommend that city staff forward our February community input meeting and our February building industry meeting to your local interested parties, to your local building industry, your local community proponents, opponents, everybody. These are education sessions, these are feedback sessions. We want our model codes to be improved as a result of these feedback events. You can tell your councils that these events were part of the education processes, outreach processes for your local cities as well. We encourage your attendance if possible, and I'll have those dates shortly. We also include ongoing technical assistance for code customization. Ideally, there's limited code customization, but we recognize that that's very hard to predict. We're also going to provide permit simplification support based on some findings on a study that SBCE did. BayAreaReachCodes.org has a bunch of resources. We'll have our templates for staff reports, template PowerPoint decks. We'll reference links to the cost effectiveness studies when they're available. And want to remind that any new adopters in PC and SPCE service area get a $10,000 grant just to bring the reach codes to a vote. It doesn't need to pass, just for a vote. So new adopters of new construction reach codes, that is available to compensate for city staff time. Want to reiterate the timeline. We're here at the yellow star in January. Finish line is January 1st, 2023. I think Blake, you did a pretty good job of going over this. So in February, we do have our outreach meetings. I'm just gonna kind of jump straight to that on our last slide here. I'll come back to our previous slide. So February 15th, 11 a.m., we have a deep dive into model codes. This is invite only, but you can feel free to forward invitations to your local constituents. You should have received this request in your inbox if you were signed up on our listserv to forward these events. We highly encourage that. Same for the community event on February 16th. That's going to be at 6 p.m. That is posted on bayareareachcodes.org. February 17th, this group will reconvene and we will share the feedback we received at these previous two meetings, and we'll get further feedback after everybody has had a chance to think through and digest their thoughts on the BayAreaReachCodes.org or the model codes that are posted on that website. We also have a couple of informational briefings at local events. There's a March 8th event for the ICC Tri-Chapter and a March 9th event for the California Building Inspection Group. Please share your opinions. There is a button that links to a form for you to provide feedback on any aspect, model codes or whatnot. I think, Aaron, I'm going to pass it to you here to close us out.
Sure. Thank you, Farhad, and thank you everyone for staying through the end of the presentation. Yeah, so like what Farhad said, we welcome your input, so please feel free to provide us your feedback through the link provided or to be provided, and if someone can paste the link to the chat, that would be great. Thank you. You can also look for more information on the Bay Area Reach Codes. It will be a repository of everything, and we hope to clarify some of the questions like those on this slide on the FAQ section and answering some of your questions going forward too. The FAQ section is not available yet, but it will be available soon. And now we'll spend some time or the remainder of this meeting to discuss and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so what opportunities and challenges do you expect in 2022-23? Are the code concepts appropriate for your city or your county? And what support do you think you will need more of or less of? We can also dive into any particular technical questions. And Myra, if you wouldn't mind facilitating us through this last piece, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think this last piece could be open forum, right, Farhad, if people just want to unmute themselves and ask their question. We encourage that. So I'm going to start it off. I see Amy has her hand up. So Amy, go ahead, start us off, and feel free to
Myra,
chime in.
Can I offer one quick clarification just before Amy jumps in? This is Zoe, and I just want to clarify for any of the SVCE cities that are on, we are providing grants for all of our cities, so new or if you're re-upping. So I just want to make sure that y'all know that.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone. This is Amy Dow from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Related to existing buildings, they mentioned the point of sale rule amendments for space and water heaters that we are looking to bring to our board by Q3 of this year. But on a different note, we are also looking at updating our CEQA significance thresholds for greenhouse gases. And we were kind of wondering in terms of the EV infrastructure recommendations that were provided. I noted that there is only the recommendation of the highest level being level 2. And we were wondering what the thought process has been in pushing forward more DC fast charging or level 3, if it's just not cost effective, if it's not considered as enough value add, like what were the reasons? Has that been modeled or considered? If it has been modeled or considered as part of REACH codes, why was it not included?
Yeah, thank you so much. Amy, I will follow up with you so that we're keeping up with your board presentations on that point of sale requirement. So I believe this is the slide that you are referencing in terms of level 2 being the top requirement. Our thinking here is that, well, I'll take a step back. There is a trade-off in the model code that allows for a certain, I think it's 5 level 2 spaces to be traded off with a DC fast charger at the option of the developer. So it's not that they are excluded, that these are minimum requirements and that those level 3 or DC fast charging can be traded off. More generally speaking, those are higher costs, and developers already are very concerned about the costs associated with providing a wholly new amenity for their building. So this was what we felt is a kind of a compromise approach to providing ubiquitous access and mitigating the upfront costs for new development. Key component that level 2 allows that DC fast charging does not is load sharing, which is mentioned at the bottom here. And if you think about all of your vehicles charging at the same time, that's a pretty, and needing a full charge, having an empty battery at the same time is going to be a low prevalence event, considering that most daily commutes are 25, 30 miles a day. So what the load sharing allows is that when there are less vehicles charging, the vehicles that are connected get a fast level of charge up to level 2. When all vehicles are charging, the rate of charge is reduced to a certain level. It depends on the scenario, but it is a low power L2 or a high power L1 in some cases, but everybody's still getting charged. What that allows is less transformers, a smaller electrical room, a smaller electrical service from the utility, and just happier developers, less complaining. But there is a DC fast charge option for trade-off as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I do see some other hands. Again, feel free to ask your question, and if not, I'll just start nominating people. Okay. David Chung with Palo Alto, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Farha. Quick question on the timeline schedule that you have. You showed that cost-effective studies coming out in March, May, and so forth. Can you kind of highlight what cost-effective studies coming out? Is that included the commercial new construction or residential new construction? Can you kind of highlight those studies?
Yes. Great. Thank you for asking about this. There's a lot of cost effectiveness studies about to come out. I believe next month we'll have non-residential alterations cost effectiveness study coming out from the statewide utility codes and standards team that looks at electrification retrofits in non-residential buildings and provides some costs and policy approaches that are enabled. So that's number one. And also in February, you should expect the single family new construction cost effectiveness study to come out. That, all of these are going to include electrification packages. In April or May, we'll have the draft results for high-rise, mid-rise, and it'll just be mid-rise, multifamily, a 3-story prototype and a 5-story prototype. And then we'll also have the non-residential new construction cost effectiveness studies that'll look at an office, a 3-story office building, 50,000 square feet, a small hotel, a retail building like a Target, and then a quick service restaurant like a fast food place, a burger place. All of those looking at electrification packages as well. And I believe we'll try to coordinate with Bayren on having some sort of presentation on those. And if that doesn't happen, we'll do that here in this forum.
Great. Also, a follow up on that, for single family, does that include ADU also, detached?
It will. Yes, I believe it will.
Great. Thank you.
Megan Campbell had a couple questions. So just to emphasize, we do have this presentation being recorded, and we can provide the recording along with the slides if anyone wants them. So what's the best way for her to shoot us an email if they want them, and we'll just respond. I don't think we're disseminating this to everyone necessarily, but.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should, we'll send the hyperlink on a as requested basis.
Okay.
I wanted to touch on one other piece about cost effectiveness. Cost effectiveness, the CEC term, is very specific, and that is only required if you choose the California Energy Code pathway that most cities used last time, but that we're not recommending as the primary pathway this time. Other information that'll be there, especially for single family, is energy cost impact and impact on capital costs, more constituent facing. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Farhad.
That's Blake.
I'm sorry, I was looking at Farhad's screen. Blake, a question that came up. So I think that lines up with what Blake was saying. So what about adopting the REACH codes through the Muni codes? Does that allow more flexibility on the timeline?
Yes, yeah, it does, because you would not have that 2-month buffer for the California Energy Commission approval. It's not the worst thing, obviously. We all went through it last code cycle, or many of us did. But it does eliminate that need to submit to the California Energy Commission.
Yeah, thanks, Farhad. Rebecca Lucky, so you have your hand up. If you want to ask your question.
Hi, Farhad and TRC team and Blake and everybody else. So really appreciate doing this workshop with city staff. And I think I've just got a couple of comments in response to the questions you had about what are the challenges. So I think, looking at our CAP goals, like one thing that would be helpful as part of the technical assistance, if a city's trying to align this with their CAP goals, and for us, it's being carbon neutral by 2030, how would each of these options kind of help us achieve that goal. And I'm not sure if it's kind of, I know everyone's developing at different rates and has different kind of building activity. So I don't know if there's like a model like where you can input data and it can kind of just, you know, produce a result that says it'll help you achieve like this much of your goals. That's a lot of work, I imagine, but it might be helpful, or if there's just something in general that can kind of speak to that. And then I really like the timeline. That's really helpful for cities. But when the question was posed, kind of what are the, it was a poll question about like what are the challenges? And I think a lot of people put competing priorities as a main one, and that is certainly for us as well with being a small city. And so for the timeline that you've proposed, it might be helpful for cities to kind of see like what should we be doing in between these times, because if I'm looking at where this is going, like our time frame to first, you know, get the electeds kind of on board, like we need to ask them, like, you know, do you want us to work on this as a first step, or start to have some options? So maybe that's kind of after the March, May, but then that leaves a very little window for community engagement and then getting to like that ultimate timeline of getting it started by January 1st. So I think that's just a helpful kind of finger in the wind for us city staff to understand like what we need to be doing while we're waiting on this timeline. And then I would just say, and it really does depend like whether cities are doing new construction or they're addressing existing buildings. So for us, that's going to be existing buildings. And I think the community engagement that goes along with that is going to be more intense than if you're looking at new construction. And so therefore, again, like we just need to be a little bit more in tune with like how much community engagement and who we're engaging with. And then I would also just kind of, in communicating to the public and the building professionals, I think for every city, you just have a unique personality. And so while it's helpful to have like these regional community forums, it doesn't mean it's necessarily getting to the folks that are going to show up to our council meetings. And so I think there is some onus onto cities, and that the councils need to recognize that we are going to need to do some community engagement. It could be very extensive if you're looking at existing buildings. And so kind of getting that on the table, which again goes to early conversations with your city council on, hey, you know, if we're going to look at existing buildings, like we're going to need to really devote a lot of, you know, city attorney time, building official time, sustainability staff time, and just making sure that that's being carved out. So then that way the competing priorities hopefully don't become an issue. So those are just my initial thoughts, but I think those are great. You know, you've done great work. I think the cost effectiveness studies are going to come up as well, because, you know, I think we've had this conversation too, like, do we really need the cost effectiveness studies to move forward? I certainly support that because it just helps, you know, build more evidence to getting to the policy. But I do feel like that'll be a topic of discussion too. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's really helpful. I think what I'll present, plan on presenting next meeting with this team is a new construction timeline and an existing buildings ordinance timeline, or existing building kind of strategy timeline. This timeline is mostly representing a new construction approach, and that's why the January 1st, 2023 date is kind of important. That's when the new building code takes effect, and we want to make sure there's no gaps. The cost effectiveness studies that come out in March, May, we don't expect, you know, a big difference in the results that were found last code cycle, which enabled all electric new construction to be adopted, right? So we feel that there's some level of confidence that cities can start talking to council members, planning for stakeholder engagement, even holding some stakeholder input meetings, saying that, you know, based on what we know around cost effectiveness and what neighboring jurisdictions have done around new construction, electrification, this is the direction we're heading for January 1st, 2023. For existing buildings, I agree with you, Rebecca, that's kind of a separate track. So I'll break that timeline out, but I do encourage for new construction that cities consider starting stakeholder engagement very, very soon, next month, if possible.
Thanks, Farhad and Rebecca. I just want to do a time check. We have 5 minutes. So what I encourage, because I don't think we won't get to all the questions. Go ahead and ask your question in the questions drop-down menu. We will do our best to review the questions and answer them if we can't get to them in the next 5 minutes. So Farhad, this question came up, and maybe this is the last one. We'll see how long it takes to respond. But as it relates to the cost effectiveness studies, how are PG&E rates taken into account, specifically, the increased rates to account for infrastructure upgrades?
Increased rates for infrastructure upgrades. Sorry, is this for an existing building scenario, or for electric vehicles, or let's see, which question was this? At least utility rates, the latest utility rates are used in the cost effectiveness studies they're available. So utility rates tend to get updated every 6 months, so the latest one will be used. The escalation rates are on 15 or 30-year timelines, accounting for decarbonization goals. So the gas rate, escalation rate is slightly higher than electric utility rates. Infrastructure costs are accounted for to the extent gas infrastructure is not installed, it's a cost savings, and utility infrastructure, the service, everything up until the service connection is accounted for. If there's utility imposed costs, that gets into a pretty complex rule set, Rule 15, Rule 16, and it varies by utility as well. Those are typically not included in these cost effectiveness studies. But considering that there are studies that have demonstrated there's a significant amount of headroom in the transformer capacity for typical construction. So electrification doesn't necessarily, particularly of the space heating, water heating, doesn't add an incrementally much larger piece, necessitating additional utility charges. On the electric vehicle side, it does depend on where you are, because if you're far away from that size, you can have significant headroom to add EV with essentially no additional cost. But if you are closer to that step and you have way less headroom, that may trigger an additional transformer cost as well. So around EVs, there is, that's a more complex discussion to have. Utility rates are always included. The most recent are always included in the cost effectiveness studies.
All right, thanks, Farhad. And again, if there's any follow-up conversation there, please include it in the feedback tracker. And if you've included it in our chat box, we'll do our best. We'll review and do our best to respond. I think we have 2 more minutes. 1 more minute here. Farhad, do you want to take one more question, or shall we close with some final thoughts? These can be pretty lengthy discussions.
Yeah, let's do one more. And then
okay.
Yeah, everybody to go to lunch after this.
Okay. So I'm actually gonna hand it over to Joanne Kurz. You had your hand up. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. My utility upgrade question was infrastructure. My jurisdiction is on the hillside. Even houses that we're building now with gas, our PG&E is barely able to provide the electrical needs that they need for these houses. Anything that's tried to do all electric, it's been astronomical costs for the upgrade, because not only are they doing transformers, they're doing pole and line replacements. So to me, and it's not like these houses have the capability of putting solar on them, because they moved to this jurisdiction because of the beautiful redwoods, the giant oak trees. They're not cutting down their trees to put in solar. So that is something that definitely needs to be addressed when there's a REACH code. For these properties that are totally infeasible or the costs are so astronomical, it just deters the person from doing any type of construction, including just adding an ADU. I just had that happen with somebody. To add an ADU, they tried to even just run a separate service to it to see if that would work. And the PG&E costs were outrageous. So it's a huge, huge issue.
What is the jurisdiction?
The town of Woodside.
Woodside, yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll do our best to address that. I have a couple answers in my head, but we're also over time. So Joanna will be in touch and we'll get back to you. Thank you so much for that comment. Thanks, everybody. This was great. I'm glad everybody was engaged and thoughtful about these. So feel free to reach out directly to your contact at PCE, SPC, or EBCE, the consultant team directly, Brianne or Denise, anybody with any questions, concerns, comments, use that button on our feedback tracker here. I'll show one more time. And we'll talk to you next month. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Congrats.
Take care.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Be safe, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.